إلهي ألف إلهي ألف
اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله في العالمين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, please recite the salawat. Over the past few nights, we've been talking about some of the sins. We explained that one of the effects of the holy month of Ramadan is supposed to be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us through our actions, through our fasting, through our patience with food and drink, and the other haram items that have been mentioned, to be able to avoid and abstain from sin better than before. In order to help this, we said that we need to discuss some of these sins, try to look at some of the consequences of these sins, remind ourselves about them. And for a lot of us, what we require, according to the saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayh, who said that worship is either based on fear or based on trade, or it's based on understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is deserving of that. Most of us have not actually reached, although we understand that that's the best form of worship, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we realize that He is worthy of worship. That's the best form of worship. However, the fact is, we're not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we can even forget about worshiping Him for whatever those causes are. Any time that we go against His will, every time that we don't fulfill an obligation that He has put on our shoulders, or we commit a sin that He has forbidden us of, then we have gone against that. So what we're talking about is try to develop ourselves to even practice that. Then we can start talking about which form of worship it is. We talked about a few of the sins over the past few sessions. We talked about music a little bit. We talked about ghibah, backbiting. What I want to talk about today and discuss a little bit is something that has become very common, and it might not be considered a sin, or not that great of a sin amongst people out here in the West. It's a very, very common phenomenon. But the Holy Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, the religion of Islam is completely opposed to it. That idea is, the sin is having foul language, profanity, using language that is inappropriate. The Holy Quran is the most polite book that can be found on the face of the earth. Even areas where it's talking about certain things that need to be talked about, some of the dimensions of our life as human beings, requires discussing things that are not very appropriate to talk about and to mention explicit words, but nevertheless they need to be talked about. I think last year we talked about this a bit. Sometimes people go on the other extreme when they feel that they need to be a little too polite. They end up causing problems for people. We gave the example of a word that is used and mistranslated in the Risalas. I remember I had an incident right here in this community where someone had a misunderstanding about a law because the translator wanted to be a little too polite. There's a ruling, it says if an animal becomes jalal, alright, it's haram to consume that animal, even though it's an animal that would have normally and otherwise been considered halal to consume. Sheep, goats, chickens, these are animals that we can have. If they become jalal, we can't have them. It's haram for us to eat the flesh. What is jalal? Well, the translation says in the Risala, if you read that, if you've ever read that, the translation says, in Farsi it says, nijasat khar. Okay. And then they've translated that to English, and to Urdu, and other languages. If an animal starts eating nijasat, then it is haram, even if you slaughter it Islamically. That's a ruling that you find, it's written there. If you refer to the Arabic fiqh books that discuss it thoroughly, they don't use that word. The person who translated that to Farsi wanted to be polite, which is not a bad idea. However, sometimes it confuses people. A brother here was saying that, I don't know if you know this or not, but in order to raise chicken, one of the things that's very commonly given to chicken is blood from the sheep that are slaughtered, for example. They gather the blood and they make some form of food for the chickens and they feed them that. It's najis. So this person was like, okay, all the chickens that are out there are najis and they eat nijasat, we cannot consume them. Any restaurant you go to is haram. The only place is only this one place that has chickens that are fed appropriately and they're not fed blood, and that's why we can consume it, only from that very specific store. When I heard it first, I was kind of shocked. I wasn't really sure what to think of that. I went and checked it and I saw it's because of this mistranslation, trying to be polite here. The only najasat that causes the animal to be haram to consume, even if it's slaughtered Islamically, is human excrements. That's it. Blood, any other form of najasat, dead animals that are najis, if they consume that, that's not going to cause the animal meat to become najis or for it to become haram and we cannot consume. There is a certain amount of politeness that is necessary, beyond that it's not. But what we're talking about is the majority of people out here, there's certain language, certain words that are so extremely common that I'm not sure if they're really considered foul words any longer. We said that we want to talk about some of the effects of these things. How bad are these sins? So what I'm going to do, I refer to the hadith books. We have plenty of hadith on this. And some of the language is pretty harsh, brothers and sisters. Imam Baqir Salamullah alayh has been quoted to have said, the first word that we get here is إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُبْغِضُ الْفَاحِشْ الْمُتَفَحِّشْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got ghadab, He's angry at. He despises a person who is al-fahish al-mutafahish. What's the difference between these two words? Sometimes it's understood, people, to an extent at least, it's understandable, and we'll try to expand on this a little bit more, that if you use foul language against somebody you call them out with some bad word, then that may be considered offensive. It's bad. We understand that. That refers to al-mutafahish. Mutafahish is if I call you a name, God forbid. If I say something ill to you, I would be considered mutafahish. But the word fahish, like some of these people, whatever they want to say, you have to hear the F word there somewhere along that sentence. They're not calling anybody that, but they keep saying it. Or they use other four-lettered words as they call them. It says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُبْغِضُ الْفَاحِشَ الْمُتَفَحِّشِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises anyone that uses this language. Now, let me emphasize, sometimes some of us are we understand the idea that we're not supposed to be constantly mentioning this. Some of us understand this. Unfortunately, out here, especially for the younger generation, I think to a great extent it's very difficult because everybody around them almost is using that form of language. I remember when we first moved over here in '93 in Washington, one of the problems that I had was this. We went to the Islamic Center to play with people our age. It was about 11 around at that time. And we went to play football. People were playing tap football. And it would be fun, but as soon as we joined the game, it was like they couldn't stop using foul language. They were calling one another. It seemed like they're friends, even towards their friends. Constantly using these words. F you, F this, F everything. It's constantly mentioned. I mean, that's one of the worst words. I don't know why they've picked one of the worst words in the world and they keep using it, but that's how it is. Foul language. Sometimes some of us at least understand how bad this is. We're not supposed to do that. But when it comes to certain areas, we neglect this. For example, when we're angry, God forbid that anger comes, and God forbid it comes where people that are before us are weak. This is something we need to work on ourselves a little bit, brothers and sisters. It's not manly, I'm more maybe addressing the brothers here, but it applies to all. It's not manly to feel strong when you're dealing with weaker people before you. This happens a lot in families. That the guy has been angry outside the house, something has happened, his nerves are wrecked. Now he's in the house, one little thing that happens, then the guy just blows up. Starts using whatever language he wishes. Now, if his child would mention those same words, I would say, why in the world are you using that language? And they would discipline them. But when we're angry, that's when we're supposed to control this. I'm going to read some of the ahadith regarding that. Look, foul language is not acceptable at all regarding no matter what it is and who it is. One of the other areas that we see, unfortunately, this is not practiced, and you see people using very, very nasty language, is when they're talking about people that religiously we have issues with. For example, one of the practices that has existed amongst some of the Shia population is something that's called Eid al-Zahra. Okay. Now there's a lot of things about that practice which is not good. But one of the things that happens is that very, very foul language, at least in some of those sessions, is used. The justification, we're using it regarding such and such person, they deserve it. Okay. Of course, if we want to talk about this practice of Eid al-Zahra, we can go on with this. I even heard that some people, because there's a saying, they say that on that day, the 9th of Rabi' Rabiul Awwal, they say there's something called Rufi' al-Qalam. Right. The pen that these angels are supposed to have that write our sins is supposed to be lifted. It's not going to be on the record, whatever you do. I've heard some people have gone and, I wanted to mention where, but I won't because it may confuse people. But anyhow, they went and drank wine, okay, in the name of this is the night that we're supposed to have fun for, you know what I'm talking about. There's even a TV station, a satellite station. There was something that was said on the satellite station which caused Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, to issue a statement. Alhamdulillah, he did. Otherwise, it would have been a serious problem in the Muslim world. That he said, look, it is haram to disrespect, not just use foul language, but disrespect those who other religions, other faiths, other sects, other schools of thought within Islam respect. This is an Islamic ruling that we have. Some people had an issue with him, and like, why in the world is he saying that? They started calling him names and using foul language against him, but this is an Islamic principle that we have. It's a Quranic principle. They said some very, very foul words in regards to the wife of the Holy Prophet, Lady Aisha. She's done some very wrong things. Some very, very wrong things. And we have evidence for it. We're not hiding that. However, does that justify saying whatever we wish? This is the wife of the Holy Prophet. When Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi wants to treat her in the battle of Jamal, one of the worst things, she's done a lot of wrong things towards the Holy Prophet and towards the Ahlul Bayt, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Lady Fatima al-Zahra and others. We have serious issues with that, but that doesn't justify speaking in whatever language you wish. During the battle of Jamal, when Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi was victorious, the way he treated the wife of the Holy Prophet was that he sent her with women back to Mecca. Okay? With all respect, he explained to her what she had done, how wrong it was, and condemned that, but there's a certain level of respect that needs to be there. So what we mean by this, and we're going to read the hadith regarding it as well, foul language is wrong, period. We cannot use that language, no matter who we are using it against. No matter what state we're in, we've got to control that nafs when we're angry and all of that. Recite the salawat, please. We said according to Amir al-Mu'mineen, some of us need fear to motivate us. Here's one hadith. There's a book by one of the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. His name is Sulaym ibn Qais al-Hilali. Okay, he's got a very important book. It's been translated also. There's a lot of good points in that. I'm not sure if this is from that book, but he quotes Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi. And Amir al-Mu'mineen quotes the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The Holy Prophet has been quoted to have said, according to this narration, that إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ الْجَنَّةَ عَلَى كُلِّ فَحَّاشٍ. That's a pretty heavy statement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made entrance into paradise haram on anyone that uses foul language. Of course, fahash means constantly using it. God forbid, sometimes it slips. We're going to talk about that as well, and how the Ahlul Bayt have covered that and what they've said in regards to it. But sometimes, as I said, there's a problem of constantly. There was this I think word that this brother coined in Qum. I don't know if he was referring to this or not, but he was saying some people have what he called verbal diarrhea. Okay, just whatever just comes out. You got to control that mouth. You can't just allow whatever to come out. Control it. Fahash, anyone that is fahash. This is a pretty strong statement. It doesn't say if they're Muslim or non-Muslim. He's addressing the believers. He's addressing the Muslimin. He's addressing the mu'mineen. Anyone that is fahash, It's forbidden. They cannot enter paradise. فَحَّاشٍ بَذِيءٍ قَلِيلِ الْحَيَاءِ. One of the other qualities that this brings about, recite a salawat please. Is قِلَّةُ الْحَيَاء, not having shame. Says لا يبالي, the other trait of this person, لا يبالي ما قال ولا ما قيل له. He doesn't care what he says to others and doesn't care what is said to them. I mean, how can people be friends? It's so normal to hear this. We're supposed to actually feel bad if somebody uses that language against us or towards us. Don't just say, oh, this guy's my friend, he doesn't really mean it. Well, he said it. Those words mean something. If you don't feel shocked, if you don't feel that you just heard something that shouldn't have been said, then you got to work on yourself. لا يبالي ما قال ولا يبالي ما قيل له. Another hadith from Imam al-Sadiq salamullah alayhi, quoting the Holy Prophet. Says, إِنَّ مِنْ شَرِّ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ مَنْ تُكْرَهْ مُجَالِسَتُهُ لِفُحْشِهِ. One of the worst of God's creations and His servants, His all creation is serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even kuffar, they're doing exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And what that means, we'll leave that for another session. But everybody is considered ibadullah. One of the worst ibadullah are those that people avoid being around them because of their foul language. Another hadith. As I said, using foul language regarding anybody, but here this is about Muslims, another effect of it. One was Allah, according to that report, the Holy Prophet has said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said there's no Jannah, no paradise for a person that's like that. But this one is interesting about this dunya, the effect of it on our lives right here. He says, "Man fahusha ala akhihi al-Muslim." If anybody uses foul language, it doesn't matter if it's just their normal conversation or they got angry. God forbid if it's their siblings, because sometimes we feel that that's going to be okay or we have a right over them. I don't know why we don't feel bad about that. Our parents, our children, our spouse, our friends, it doesn't make a difference. A believer. نَزَعَ اللَّهُ مِنْهُ بَرَكَةَ رِزْقِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to remove the blessing from His rizq. This needs a little bit of explanation. Sometimes we think that wealth is something that having it is good. There are certain things in this world that are valued in and of themselves. They're valuable themselves. They don't require anything else. One of them, for example, is justice. Justice is valuable at whatever level, whoever does it, wherever it is found. If it's considered justice, if it's an example of justice, it's valued and it's great. Certain things are not like that. For example, war and peace. War and peace are not innately good or bad. Sometimes war is very wrong. You're not supposed to have war. You're not supposed to be engaged in war. But sometimes that's the right thing to do. You have to. Any rational, reasonable person understands that, regardless of their faith. Sometimes it's actually good. Peace is sometimes good, sometimes it's the worst thing you can do. If Imam Hussein would have accepted peace in Karbala, that would have been the worst thing he could have done. But if Imam Mujtaba would have fought where he accepted the truce, that would have been the worst thing to do. These are not absolutely valuable regardless of the context. One of those items is wealth. Having money is not in and of itself good. It's not going to be valuable. Regardless of how you spend it, that's a different story. Just having it itself. It's not going to be a good thing that you will have necessarily. We have wealth that is barakah, that is a blessing, and we have wealth that is not barakah, instead it is niqmah. Alright? It's niqmah. It's not a blessing, it's a curse. The wealth itself, having that, it's a curse. The Imam, according to this report, says, if one uses foul language regarding their brother or sister, the blessing in their wealth, they'll have the wealth, it's not necessarily going to be taken away from them, the wealth itself. You may still have the wealth, but the blessing is removed from it. It's going to be a curse for you. For a lot of people, the wealth that they have is a curse for them, even based on worldly standards. What type of a wealth is this? That you have so much attachment towards this wealth that when the stock market has a problem, you have a heart attack. Is that a blessing? You have a lot more than you can even spend. Usually we start, gathering and it starts accumulating. By the time we have enough wealth that we're filthy rich, usually we're at an age that we can't really benefit from it too much. We try our best, but either the cholesterol is going to go up, or our body can't take certain forms of fun that we would have enjoyed if we were in our 20s, but it's too late now. And the effect that it has, that attachment, it becomes a niqmah. This is a worldly example. A real example, a more substantial example, something that is Islamically more important, is what affects our hereafter. You have this wealth, this huge mansion even, and you've put all your life on it, but you see your children have gone the wrong direction. That's not a blessing, that's not a barakah, that's niqmah. Because the more you have it, the more it's going to help you go in the wrong direction. When you want to work your way, now we're talking about foul language here, but a side note, about having jobs, working for wealth. Working to gain wealth is not wrong Islamically at all. The ones that actually worked hard, not necessarily, of course, their objective wasn't to gain money and for the wealth of it, to do the right thing, to do something that's beneficial, although there's going to be wealth involved with it. We're the Ahlul Bayt. You know how many orchards Amirul Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi set up in Medina during the 25 years that he was not ruling. He didn't just sit around do nothing. He would dig up wells, he would bring other palm trees, date trees, and plant them and set up a whole orchard, and then at the end of it, he would say to his son Imam al-Mujtaba Salamullah alayhi that quickly, before shaitan comes, let's make this a waqf. They just finished the job, it's now considered an orchard. Let's make this a waqf. A waqf is basically something like a non-profit organization, but in the form of an orchard there. Whatever comes from this goes to the poor, or goes to the poor of this family or the other family. They work very hard. There's a hadith, Imam al-Baqir Salamullah alayhi used to work in the heat where others would be resting. He would be on the farm working hard, and some people would go and object and say, why are you working so hard for the dunya? The Imam would say, this is not working for the dunya. Working for wealth is not wrong. However, do it in the right way. Try to find an occupation that is halal. Do work that is halal. Don't gain money through haram means. And go and figure out what is halal and what is haram. Because once that haram starts coming in, it's going to start multiplying. You're going to have more wealth, but it's not going to have the barakah. It's going to have niqmah with it. Recite a salawat, please. There's an interesting hadith. We really wish, I was giving a talk somewhere, and we're trying to explain the importance of praying for the coming of the Imam and doing things to prepare the grounds for the coming of the Imam. And I said, how many times have we heard this? We're constantly hearing, let's pray for the coming of the Imam, let's prepare the grounds, let's do whatever our share is to prepare the grounds for the coming of the Imam. But what are we actually doing? Why isn't it clicking? We've heard many times what is the cause of the Imam not being with us, and what's going to be helping the cause of him coming. In order to feel the absence of the Imam, we need to understand what it means to have the blessing of the Imam amongst you and amongst us. We don't really understand that. One of the ahadith, I think, that can kind of help us understand this is this. The Ahlul Bayt, if they're around, they'd be helping you personally if we work on ourselves. If we try to become better people, they don't just give us general advice, they would come and tell us specifically what we're doing wrong and help us get rid of it. This hadith is a companion called Sama'ah or Suma'ah, both are pronounced. He says, دخلت على أبي عبد الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. I entered upon the Imam, فقال لي مبتدئا. I didn't say anything to him. He started this conversation. He says, يا سماعة ما هذا الذي كان بينك وبين جمالك. He told me, what was this? Why did you do what you did? Why did you do what you did? And what happened between you and your Jamal, the person that takes care of like the shepherd that takes care of his camels? Why did you treat him in that way? إياك أن تكون فحاشا أو سخابا أو لعانا. You should refrain from being a person who uses foul language, and a person that constantly does la'an or is constantly shouting. When we get angry, our tone starts to rise. The Imam tells him, don't be like that. فقلت, he says, وَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ كَانَ ذَلِكَ أَنَّهُ ظَلَمَنِي. The reason why I got onto him and I was angry at him and I said those words and I was shouting at him is because he oppressed me. I didn't just start using foul language against him. The Imam says, إِن كَانَ ظَلَمَكْ لَقَدْ أَرْبَيْتَ عَلَيْهِ. If he oppressed you, you did worse to him. It's interesting. He might have, I don't know, maybe he beat him up or something, physically. Maybe he stole some of his property. It's some form of physical oppression. The Imam says, what you have done didn't just replace the oppression that he did, you've done worse. Your oppression is more than what he did. It says, إِنَّ هَذَا لَيْسَ مِنْ فِعَالِي وَلَا آمُرُ بِهِ شِيعَتِي اسْتَغْفِرْ رَبَّكَ وَلَا تَعِدْ. This is not something that I would do, and this is not something that I tell my Shia to do. You should repent, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and never repeat. I never tell my Shia to do this. Got to be careful if we are the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. One more hadith. I was going to say things, but I realized there's so many hadith. Let me just read them to you. and just translate them, that's sufficient. Recite the salawat. It says, كان لأبي عبد الله عليه الصلاة والسلام صديق. There was a friend, the Imam al-Sadiq salamullah alayhi had a friend. لا يكاد يفارقه, that used to be around the Imam at all times. إذا ذهب مكانا, anytime the Imam went to a place, then this friend of his used to join him. فبينما هو يمشي معه في الحذائين ومعه غلامه غلام له سندي يمشي خلفهما. One time they went to the marketplace, they went to the Hadda'in, the shoemakers, where they used to make the shoes. And this guy had a ghulam. The ghulam was Sindi. I'm sure some of us here at least understand what that means. He was from Sindh. Okay. I think Sindh, there's a province in India as well, or I don't know, a state. It's only in Pakistan? Only in Pakistan. Okay. So this brother, this man, apparently he's not Muslim, or at least his mother is not Muslim. He's from Sindh. He's a ghulam, he's a slave. The Imam and this friend were walking in front, and this ghulam, the slave, is walking behind them. إِذَا الْتَفَتَ الرَّجُلُ يُرِيدُ غُلَامَهُ ثَلَاث مَرَّاتٍ. This man looked behind him to find his slave. He wanted to say something to him. He looked behind him once, he didn't see him. Second time, he didn't see him. A third time, he didn't see him. He wanted to tell him to do something. He was supposed to be there and he wasn't. He got angry. فَلَمَّا نَظَرَ فِي الرَّابِعَةِ, when he saw the slave in the fourth time, قَالْ يَبْنَ الْفَاعِلَةِ. Okay. He referred to him as son of a bee. Okay. The B word. Your mother is one that has committed adultery. Okay. He referred to him as in that language. When he did this in front of the Imam, this is a friend that used to be with the Imam at all times. A friend, okay? In other words, it's not just a regular Shia either. It's a friend of the Imam. The Imam, the Imam says, or it says, فَرَفَعَ أَبُو عَبْدِ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ يَدَهُ فَسَكَّ بِهَا جَبْهَةَ نَفْسِهِ. He raised his hand when he heard this, and he started hitting himself on his forehead. ثُمَّ قَالَ, then he said, Subhanallah, تَقْذِفُ أُمَّهِ. You're accusing his mother of having committed adultery? We don't realize when we say something like that to a person, we're accusing either them or, God forbid, their mother, or in some foul language, in some cultures, unfortunately, their sister. Somebody is being accused of committing these sins. We don't even realize. We just use it as a word we sometimes maybe even forget the meaning of it. When the Imam heard this, he couldn't take it. تَقْذِفُ أُمَّهِ. قَدْ كُنْتُ أَرَى أَنَّ لَكَ وَرَعًا. I thought that you had wara'. I thought you avoided sin. But I see that you don't. He started bringing an excuse. He said, well, his mother is a mushrik. She's not even Muslim. He said, that doesn't mean anything. First of all, every culture, every people have a form of marriage. And when they are married in their culture, then they are not considered illegitimate children, and their relationship is not called adultery or fornication. You have no right to say that. Recite the salawat, please. There's another hadith, I'll leave that at the beginning of our discussion tomorrow night, but I want to use this last part for this. I've heard some people have had the audacity to come out and say, God forbid This has been, I think, on some satellite channel or somewhere, some zakir has said something like this, which is completely absurd. That all Ahlul Sunnah, God forbid, are illegitimate children. They say this, and I want to clarify this for those who have this question, just a couple of words, and say how nasty this is. This is not what the Ahlul Bayt ever taught us, and this should not be taken as something that the Shi'as say or believe in. Based on the fiqhi ruling, we have something called Tawafun Nisa in Hajj. If you go to Hajj and you don't do Tawafun Nisa, you cannot have any relationship with your wife if you've already married, and if you haven't been married, then you cannot marry anyone. The contract is going to be invalid. Based on that, they said, well, all these people go to Hajj. They said that they don't do Tawafun Nisa, so they've gotten into Ihram, but since they haven't done Tawafun Nisa, all their marriages are invalid, all this, that, the other, and they're illegitimate children, all kinds of stuff. Where is this coming from? This is completely non-Islamic. Completely, according to the Shia fiqh. According to the Shia fiqh. Unless, according to their rulings, some, God forbid, some Sunni brother or sister, God forbid, commits that act, that would be considered fornication or adultery. Otherwise, if they're married, they go to Hajj, all that's considered legitimate, and none of their children are illegitimate, none of that relationship is. Why? I don't understand the reason for why people feel this is something to even talk about and discuss. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the right of the Ahlul Bayt, to guide us and to enlighten us to their teachings, to help us avoid all sins, including this very bad and ugly sin of using foul language. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our Imam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to become His close companions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prolong the life of and give good health to all of our maraja, and especially the leader. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us of all of our sins. We ask Him to relieve all people of the world, especially the believers, of the oppression that they are facing, inshaAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all and all believers the hajat that they need, inshaAllah. Bin Nabiyya wa alihi, rahimallahu man qara'a al-Fatihata ma'a salawat. The effect of the holy month of Ramadan is supposed to be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us through our actions, through our fasting, through our patience with food and drink, and the other haram items that have been mentioned, to be able to avoid and abstain from sin better than before. In order to help this, we said that we need to discuss some of these sins, try to look at some of the consequences of these sins, remind ourselves about them. And for a lot of us, what we require, according to the saying of Amirul Mu'mineen Salamullah alayh, who said that worship is either based on fear or based on trade, or it's based on understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is deserving of that. Most of us have not actually reached, although we understand that that's the best form of worship, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we realize that He is worthy of worship. That's the best form of worship. However, the fact is, we're not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we can even forget about worshiping Him for whatever those causes are. Any time that we go against His will, every time that we don't fulfill an obligation that He has put on our shoulders, or we commit a sin that He has forbidden us of, then we have gone against that. So what we're talking about is try to develop ourselves to even practice that, then we can start talking about which form of worship it is. We talked about a few of the sins over the past few sessions. We talked about music a little bit. We talked about ghibah, backbiting. What I want to talk about today and discuss a little bit is something that has become very common, and it might not be considered a sin or not that great of a sin amongst people out here in the West. It's a very, very common phenomenon. But the Holy Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, the religion of Islam is completely opposed to it. Too polite. There's a ruling, it says if an animal becomes jalal, alright, it's haram to consume that animal, even though it's an animal that would have normally and otherwise been considered halal to consume. Sheep, goat, chickens, these are animals that we can have. If they become jalal, we can't have them. It's haram for us to eat the flesh. What is jalal? Well, the translation says in the Risala, if you read that, if you've ever read that, the translation says, in Farsi it says, nijasat khar. Okay. And then they've translated that to English and to Urdu and other languages. If an animal starts eating nijasat, then it is haram, even if you slaughter it Islamically. That's a ruling that you find, it's written there. If you refer to the Arabic fiqh books that discuss it thoroughly, they don't use that word. The person who translated that to Farsi wanted to be polite, which is not a bad idea. However, sometimes it confuses people. A brother here was saying that, I don't know if you know this, that idea is, the sin is having foul language, profanity, using language that is inappropriate. The Holy Quran is the most polite book that can be found on the face of the earth. Even areas where it's talking about certain things that need to be talked about, some of the dimensions of our life as human beings, requires discussing things that are not very appropriate to talk about and to mention explicit words, but nevertheless they need to be talked about. I think last year we talked about this a bit. Sometimes people go on the other extreme. When they feel that they need to be a little too polite, they end up causing problems for people. We gave the example of a word that is used and mistranslated in the Risalas. I remember I had an incident right here in this community where someone had a misunderstanding about a law because the translator wanted to be a little too الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في العالمين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, please recite the salawat. Over the past few nights, we've been talking about some of the sins. We explained that one of